Gaza, they pulled out of Gaza. They pulled out in terms of negotiating. It was too bad. Hamas didn't really want to make a deal. I think they want to die, and it's very, very bad.
Are you done with
and it got to be to a point where you're going to have to finish the job. They're going to have to fight, and they're going to have to clean it up. You're going to have to get rid of it.
So, as you just saw there, Trump gave Israel the green light to, quote, finish the job this morning after the latest round of ceasefire negotiations failed once again earlier this week. We'll give you some more details about those negotiations and how they fell apart. But first, Cenk, what's your reaction to Trump's statement there?
I think that not only is it going to lead to massive tragedy, and we'll explain in a minute how that tragedy will unfold, I think that it also is a sign that he has made a decision to not challenge Israel anymore. And I think it will also doom his presidency. So that comment you just heard there, I think it has monumental impact. But let's give you the rest, and then Jules and all of us will break it down.
All right, so more details on that. Earlier this week, Israel pulled out of their negotiations. They pulled their delegation out of Qatar. The U.S. and Israel are unsurprisingly putting all the blame on Hamas, claiming they weren't interested in a deal. Senior Hamas official Bassem Naim disputed that, saying the talks had been constructive. Here's a quote per the AP News Wire. What we have presented with full awareness and understanding of the complexity of the situation, we believe could lead to a deal if the enemy had the will to reach one. More on that. Hamas says it only will release all hostages in exchange for a full Israeli withdrawal and end to the war. Israel says it will not agree to end the conflict until Hamas gives up power and disarms. The militant group says it is prepared to leave power but not surrender its weapons. That's according to the AP. But like Trump, Netanyahu is now suggesting openly that he thinks a deal is dead. This is from Netanyahu, quote, together with our U.S. allies, we are now considering alternative options to bring our hostages home, end Hamas's terror rule, and secure lasting peace for Israel and our region. That from Netanyahu. And when he was asked what the plan is for bringing the last of the hostages home, he offered literally no ideas. Here is a clip.
What are the alternative methods to bring hostages home from Gaza?
Well, we got a lot of them out, and it's I've always said those last 10 or 20 are going to be the toughest, because Hamas knows what happens when they don't have any bargaining chip. And they really broke a deal. They broke a deal, and you're going to have to do what you have to do right now. It's a terrible thing.
What about on
and I always knew that. I said, when you get down to the last one, they're not going to be able to make a deal. I think what's going to happen is they're going to be hunted down.
So meanwhile, far-right Israeli officials like Itamar Ben-Gvir are celebrating the dead deal by calling for a total stoppage of aid to Gaza and a complete takeover of the Strip. Also writing on X, quote, total annihilation of Hamas, encourage emigration, Jewish settlement. That from Ben-Gvir. Cenk.
Yeah, the heritage minister yesterday said, oh, you never feed your enemies. The British didn't feed the Nazis, etc. So he's saying, yeah, well, of course we're going to starve them. By the way, of course, not true. We do feed prisoners of war, and the Palestinians are not prisoners of war. They're prisoners of Israel. They're civilians. They did not sign up for this war, but they're promised total annihilation by genocidal maniacs like Ben-Gvir and the heritage minister. The heritage minister also said, yeah, of course we're going to come in and we're going to bring Jewish settlers in. Guys, this is not in dispute. They voted on this. They're going to try to take Gaza. They're going to try to annex the West Bank. Benjamin Netanyahu brought a map of Greater Israel to the UN a couple of years ago. They couldn't be any clearer. We are going for Greater Israel. So we're going to drive the Palestinians out. And so for a while, Donald Trump was standing up to Israel. And he was saying, hey, you know what? He cut him out of the deal that peace deal he made with the Houthis, with Hamas, for exchange for one hostage. And he told them to bring their planes back. So I was okay. Now we got a ball game. I don't know. I'm not positive which direction he's going to go. That clip tells you, no, it's over. He's going in Israel's direction, and he's saying, finish him. I mean, that's just, it doesn't get any worse. Because, guys, think about the mechanics of it. It's finally dawning on some people in mainstream media what Israel's up to. Before, they were so happy to say, self-defense, you guys are conspiracy theorists, crazy, anti-Semite, anti-Semite. No way. And now Israel's like, I don't know how much clearer we can make it. We have several ministers saying we're going to kill them all, or we're going to drive them out, and we're going to take the land. And here's a map of what we're going to do, right? And here we are, starving children to death. 111 dead. Actually, it's probably higher by today. That was yesterday's number. 111 dead of starvation overall, 81 of them kids. These are yesterday's numbers. 6-week-old baby died. A 4-pound baby girl died. And it's just going and going and going. Starvation right in front of our eyes, and they're admitting it. If we have Republican Congressman Randy Fine here, a U.S. Congressman, saying, starve away. I mean, we have people who are saying, yeah, we're fascists. We would like to murder these people and take their land. And so the entire time mainstream media was like, no way Israel would do that. Well, now they are doing it. And some of them are beginning to go, well, I'm out of excuses. And to be honest, like, the ones that I've seen, the sense I got was they were genuine. They really are shell-shocked that Israel is going to do what we said they were going to do from day one. They genuinely believe that was a conspiracy theory. Israel was so moral. They were just trying to defend themselves. They had to murder 59,000 people to defend themselves. And I guess they genuinely believe that ludicrous insanity. And now, if you're going to do it, you have to actually kill them and drive them into the desert and starve them. And we're all seeing the kids starve every single day. Pictures are coming out that look like the Holocaust. So now, are you offended? Nobody's offended, right? That's insane to be offended now, because the pictures are identical. The kids are just skin and bones. And then how do you know they're skin and bones? Then they die because of starvation. I mean, what kind of monstrous government starves children to death? So what are they going to do? Are they really going to do one of the most barbaric things we have ever seen almost on live television? And how much are they going to get everyone to hate Israel? This is the most mental thing I have ever seen. If you're in favor of the Palestinians, first of all, you should, because they're human beings. Of course you're outraged by this. But if you're in favor of Israel, you should also be outraged. My God, what have they done to your country? Now the whole world thinks, oh, the most monstrous government in the world? That's not even debatable. That's not close. I mean, yeah, okay, we can have an argument about Sudan or North Korea or whatever, but right now, what the whole world is seeing is one government starving children to death. So it's about to get way more brutal. I mean, we're already at maximum brutal, and they're going to go past that. And when they do, and Trump goes, no, Israel, and you have to pay for it. Give me more money, Americans. Let's go, give me more money. Give it to me. Here you go, Israel. Murder more people. Kill them more. Starve them more. No, they're playing with fire. America at some point is going to say, enough of this goddamn thing. You're making us morally complicit with a goddamn genocide. And you're taking my money to murder these kids? No, Israel can keep going, and Netanyahu can keep going, oh yeah, poke the bear. But one day the bear's going to wake up, okay? And guys, not about religion, about governments. And this government thinks it's the boss of us. And right now, it definitely is. Guys, we just sent them $500 million just 2 days ago, in the middle of stories about how children are starving to death. And you know what the vote was? 422 to 6. Don't tell me our government isn't controlled by Israel. Don't tell me that's a trope. Okay, if it was a trope, they just made it real. 422 to 6 is not complicated. And so finally, why don't we have a ceasefire? Israel says, this is my proposal for the ceasefire that Trump is backing. Give me back the hostages. Okay, of course, so you want the hostages back. I want the hostages to come back. And they say, in return, Hamas says, okay, then the war is over, right? We've given back all the hostages. You've already slaughtered as many people as you possibly can, so the war's over. Israel's like, no, it'll be a temporary ceasefire. Then we'll go back to killing you. Who would agree to that? You can hate Hamas and still say that's a preposterous deal. Two things can be true at the same time. That's a ludicrous proposal. No one in their right mind would ever agree to that. Oh, I'll give up my only leverage, here you go, and then you go back to murdering me. What part of that is a deal? Oh, I would like you to all come out in the public and hand your weapons over. And how is that going to work? Oh, here we are, we're Hamas, here's me with a weapon, boom, dead. You're gonna kill them all instantly. Who would, okay, here's the peace deal I'm offering you. I'm gonna murder all of you, and then I'm gonna keep murdering your civilians. Wow, what a great peace deal. I'm so surprised they turned it down.
I agree with you emphatically here. And I also think we're missing kind of the insidious nature of the way Trump is looking at this. Because I think more than anything else, Trump would like the U.S. government to reflect the Israeli government. I mean, the Israeli government is authoritarian, it's ethno-nationalist, it's run by a corrupt fascist who ostensibly does have some, or at least enough support, enough political support to enact a full-scale genocide. And I think when Trump sees that, he doesn't see enough of that in the U.S. government. And for me, I mean, the U.S. backing a genocide, funding the bombs, saying that like October 7th and Hamas and hostages justify this collective punishment on 2 million plus people is insane. And the biggest issue here. But I think looking at the way that Trump is looking at Israel on another level, where he's proud of the work they're doing. He admires Netanyahu for being a strong man, and I think it's exactly the kind of strong man he wants to be. And that to me is equally horrifying, because we look at the Israeli genocide of Palestinians, and that's the worst thing that we've looked at in our recent history. And I'm terrified of wondering, well, what does the Trump camp want to do, given how emphatically supportive they are of this horrifying crime against humanity? That to me is this isn't a Trumpism. This is Trump communicating exactly what he supports, exactly what he wants, and the way he wants the U.S. government to look in general. It's beyond terrifying to me.
Yeah, for me, like, there's nothing scarier and more on the nose than saying finish the job. Like, the trope of finality, like a final solution to the situation, just does not look good. Cenk, you mentioned the congressperson who was walking down the hallway talking about letting the Gazans starve. For me, it's about, if America is supposed to be this like bright shining city on the hill and the moral authority in world politics, it's hard to pull that look off still when you're saying stuff like this and doing stuff like this. It has this whole like, it seems like Trump's just like flush it out, there will be no Gaza Strip after this. Seems like it's very cut and dry, similar to just like the way he redrew the path of a hurricane. He wants to redraw the map of the east side of the Mediterranean and just be like, yeah, this seems simpler and there will be more resort hotels. That's the stuff where it's like, item 500,000 on the list of ways that Trump and the way he's guiding America has really ruined a lot of its legacy. What's left of it, what we could convince people and get away with, so to speak. It's just sad, it's pathetic, and it's heartbreaking because people, I can't really, I've seen enough devastation. I thought after it, I was like, it'll be a typical thing where after October 6th, then there will be a counterattack where the casualties will be 4 times higher than the casualties suffered by the Israeli side, and then it will end. Maybe there will be a change to the map, which is given back under some kind of, ceding and increased occupation type agreement or harsher way to handle people. But no, this is worse than in my lifetime's memory, as far in my memory recently.
Last thing I'll say is, I don't know when and how the American people can rebel, because as we're going to show you later in the show, AIPAC's the #1 donor to Congress, #1 donor to the Republican leadership, #1 donor to the Democratic leadership. So the politicians are a lost cause. They're gone. The politicians will not help us, and they don't care if you're on the right, the left, and they don't care if 90% of the country, because 90% of the country agrees to get money out of politics. They don't care. 84% want paid family leave. They don't care. They don't care. They're never going to change, because they're all 2-bit crooks. They agreed to prostitute themselves for campaign donations, and that's for everyone, not just foreign governments, but big pharma, oil, etc. So those prostitutes are never going to turn around, okay? So then the question is, how do we, the American people, rebel enough where we go, I can't do it anymore. I can't ask Bob and Sally in Kansas to give money they don't have to kill children in Gaza. It's a bridge too far. It's the American government kind of breaking us and saying, well, now you guys are going to have to do something crazy. You guys are going to have to do some sort of rebellion that I don't know how you're going to do it, but we will not represent you under any circumstance. This isn't just about Israel. This is Donald Trump and the entire United States Congress saying, we will not represent you. We are not America first. We're not anything but donor first. So what are you going to do about it? They're rubbing it in our face. And I don't know what we're going to do about it. But this is going to get super ugly. Gaza's already one of the worst humanitarian catastrophes of my lifetime. And then it's about to take it to a completely different level. And then the anger in this country, you ask Bob and Sally 1,000 times over, now give me more money to give to this government. And it's not just that you're giving to a different government, but a government in the middle of these war crimes, this slaughter. No, the American people are going to break at some point, and I don't know what's going to happen when that happens. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.
So the reason for me wanting to come forward and share this story is apolitical. The distribution method, the delivery of aid, is not being done in line with American values.
20 Palestinians were killed
while trying to get to food aid distribution sites.
My name is Tony Aguilar. I'm a retired Lieutenant Colonel Green Beret from service in the United States Army. I served for a career of 25 years. I've deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, in combat operations and numerous other operational deployments. So I spent a considerable amount of time in Gaza during my 45 days in Israel. I was under a contract by UG Solutions, which is the security apparatus under the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I felt it was a noble cause. I felt it was a good mission to feed the people of Gaza. So I did sign up and go on the contract. The IDF gave us, SRS, UG, they gave us our marching orders. They told us which sites we would deliver from, when we would deliver, how much aid we would deliver, how much time we would stay on the site to deliver, what type of aid we would deliver. The IDF controlled and directed every aspect of the delivery of aid. From the very first day, distribution at Site 1 has been chaotic, pandemonium. The best way that I can describe how the Palestinians reach the site to receive aid is akin to the Hunger Games. Survival of the fittest. Whomever can run the fastest and the furthest to get to the site first gets the aid. So those that are typically left with receiving no aid, no food, no type of aid are children, women, disabled. The sites themselves, in terms of the process for having the Palestinians leave the distribution site, was done through shooting at them, hitting them with pepper spray and tear gas, firing rubber bullets from shotguns at them. And this isn't something that happened just once or twice. This happened every day at every distribution, at every site. This is not hyperbole. This is not Hamas propaganda. This is not Gaza Ministry of Health saying it. It's me. I've seen it. The contractors, on one occasion, on the 29th of May at site number 4, opened fire with his individually assigned weapon into the crowd, at their feet, over their heads, and into the crowd. As he did this, he celebrated what he was doing and he yelled, "Woohoo!" Then another contractor who was standing next to me said, "I think you got one." The contractor that was shooting then replied, "Hell yeah, boy." I took the video. I was there. I saw it. I watched it happen. The contractor that said, "Damn, I think you got one, man," was referring to a Palestinian man that fell to the ground and never got up. It's It's within my assessment that he was dead. And another incident on the 2nd of June at distribution site number 1, which is in the south in Rafah, I witnessed a UG contractor throw a stun grenade into the crowd. The metal fuse top of the stun grenade hit a Palestinian woman in the head, and she immediately dropped to the ground, lifeless and motionless. A donkey cart was brought onto the site to load her onto the donkey cart to remove her from the site at the direction of the SRS operational leadership. She was dead. This happened on the site. On the 28th of May, we submitted a report to the leadership of UGS and Safe Reach Solutions that site number 3 in particular was dangerous and that people would die if changes were not made. Those changes were not made. And on the 16th of July, 20 people died.
20 Palestinians were killed Wednesday morning at its food distribution site in Khan Yunis.
Palestinians, human beings, trampled to death on a site that we could have prevented. Those deaths are on us as Americans. We're complicit in that. In the dozens of distributions that I was a part of at every site, not one time ever did I feel a threat, assess a threat, see a threat, never saw a weapon, never saw a gun. The fire, the actual small arms fire that we received on the locations at times came from the IDF in our location. The entire city of Rafah has been razed to the ground, so there is no civilian population around the sites. They have to travel 8 to 12 kilometers one way, on foot, no vehicles. Most of them don't have shoes, poorly clothed. They haven't eaten, they're starving. There is no water that's distributed in the humanitarian aid. And to get there, they have to walk through an active war zone. On 2 occasions, I bore witness to a Palestinian man in one instance and a Palestinian woman in a second instance that were carrying their dead children. And these children didn't die from gunshot wounds or from sickness or disease. They died of starvation. I've seen it with my own eyes. I witnessed it on the ground in Gaza. Americans don't set up food to a starving population and have them walk through a war zone just to then shoot at them and hit them with stun grenades and pepper spray and then send them on their way. That's not the American way. That isn't in line with American values. After 25 years of service, when I hung up my uniform, I didn't hang up my oath. And my oath is to the Constitution and to the values of this country. Not to a president, not to a Congress, not to a company, but to this country. And I think most Americans would agree with that. The distribution itself is not feeding the population of Gaza. In fact, we are starving them because we are providing them with so little. The mechanism in place right now does not work. It is my job to make sure that the American people know this, because our tax dollars are going to this. Your tax dollars, U.S. taxpayers, are funding this. When I was hired on the 14th of May, signed my contract, that was supposed to run through the 21st of August. On the 14th of June, at that point, I had witnessed indiscriminate shooting, inappropriate use of force, dereliction from the leadership. I brought each circumstance to the leadership with a recommendation and solution on how we could address this. I was committed to seeing this succeed. When the leadership ignored it, that was my red line. That crossed my moral threshold of what I could put up with. And I left. I terminated my contract and I came home.
Wait. Something hides in the dark.
It is difficult to have the words anymore to describe the genocidal depravity which the Israeli state, with the full complicity and facilitation of our government, is unleashing against the Palestinian people in Gaza. But there's no better person to discuss that with than Dr. Nick Maynard, who has just come back from Gaza. He was there for a month this time in Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. That's his 3rd time since this genocide began, but he has been to Gaza many times before that. So, Nick, honestly, we're just incredibly honoured to to be able to speak to you. You came back last week, and it's I mean, you've done this brilliant round of interviews on television and to explain what's happening, what is happening. I just want to, if it's okay, and firstly, it's great to see you. I just want to, just this time, this 4-week period, just when you had to, I know you tell us, how to prepare yourself to go to Gaza. What was it compared to those previous visits, and how much could you actually have prepared yourself for what you were going to see?
Yeah, thank you, and it's great to see you again, and thank you for asking me back on your show. A lot of what I have seen and experienced, I'm afraid, almost defies description. I know Gaza really well. It's my third trip, as you say, since the genocide started. Each time I go, I think I'm going to be ready. I think I'm going to be prepared. I know Gaza really well. I've got a lot of friends there. I'm in contact most days with people out there. So each time I've gone, I think I'm going to be prepared. But each time I'm woefully unprepared, I'm afraid, because the horrors just get worse. This most recent trip, I had a month out there. I knew what I was going to see. I knew I was going to see malnutrition. I knew I was going to see relentless mass casualties, but it was just so much worse than I thought. The malnutrition was deeply distressing to witness, watching newborn babies die of malnutrition, watching children die of malnutrition, watching adults who I'd operated on die of malnutrition. Just so much worse than I'd seen even last year when I was there. And the new experience, seeing, which I would never have imagined I would see, the multiple shootings I operated on, saw patients from multiple shootings affecting very young teenage boys, sometimes as young as 11 or 12, who'd all been shot by Israeli soldiers and quadcopters at the food distribution sites, the bizarrely named Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sites. And seeing these young boys being brought in, one of them, a 12-year-old boy, died on the operating table while we were operating on him because his injuries were so severe. But seeing many of these kids being brought in, they were going to these food distribution sites. They were going to get food for their starving families. And the particularly distressing thing was the clustering of particular body part shootings on particular days. So one day, for example, we'd see these young boys coming in with predominantly gunshot wounds to the head, another day gunshot wounds to the neck, another day gunshot wounds to the chest or the abdomen. One day, even 2.5 weeks ago, we saw 4 young teenage boys, all of whom brought in at the same time with gunshot wounds to the testicles. And the clustering, the targeting was so striking that it was inconceivable that it was coincidence, and it just made us all believe this was some sort of obscene target practice, some games being played by the Israeli soldiers. And the narrative, the descriptions I received from the families, from the patients, and indeed from close friends of mine, Gazan healthcare workers who'd been at the food distribution points, all described the same thing of Israeli soldiers and quadcopters shooting these poor young boys. So just awful, and nothing could have prepared me for that.
So I know this is kind of teasing this out even more than you've already said in quite explicit terms, but there's no actual conceivable or rational explanation other than on particular days, those Israeli soldiers have decided to shoot at a specific area of the bodies of teenage boys, of many of them, their children we're talking about here. And that's what they're doing. It's like, today we'll go for the abdomen, or today we'll go for the testicles, and that's what they've done.
Absolutely, and as you can imagine, I've thought incessantly about this. It is. I cannot imagine any other reason other than that which you've described, and the one that appeared to us. They're target. They're playing a game. That's what it seemed like to us, and So many of us notice this pattern in the emergency room, all the specialist surgeons. It's an obscene thought, and I would not have thought it possible if I had not seen this with my own eyes. So yes, I think it's exactly as you described.
Something is amiss.
I mean, that itself is indicative of, I guess, what would have been your wider clinical experience. Because if we're at a point where soldiers have dehumanized the people whose land they're occupying so much that they're prepared to play games of let's shoot at various parts of their anatomy this day, then the wider conclusion is that they have no respect of any description for civilian life, and a lot then flows from that you are just treating civilians who are actually being deliberately killed as a matter of policy. These aren't, it's not even we're being completely reckless and we've decided this is a Hamas militant and we're just going to blow up this building. Not that there's many buildings left. And then we civilians we're killing, but we're talking about something quite different there. We're talking about the deliberate shooting of civilians.
Yeah, absolutely, and we've witnessed. You'll have seen many of the interviews that I've given, or other UK doctors or American doctors, and indeed many of us have put this down in print to letters to our respective governments. Every single healthcare worker I have been out there with, spoken to, has witnessed at various times over the last 22 months gunshot wounds to babies' heads or to babies' chests or to babies' abdomens, toddlers being shot. The pattern of injuries, the frequency with which we're seeing them, it is inconceivable this is collateral damage. The only explanation any of us can conceive of is that this is deliberate targeting. I saw, I operated on two young women just about a week before I left Gaza, who had both been living in tents. I mean, I call them tents, but they're hardly tents. They're makeshift shelters right next door to the food distribution centres, these GHF centres. One of them was pregnant. One of them was breastfeeding her 7-month-old boy. They were both shot in their tents by quadcopters, and they both described, and I heard this from other people as well, they both described the quadcopters shooting systematically at all the tents, at all the makeshift shelters next to these food distribution points. So they weren't just shooting the young teenage boys. It wasn't just the Israeli snipers shooting the Israeli boys. The quadcopters were shooting deliberately at the tents. These two women both shot severe injuries in the abdomen. I had to operate on both of them. Luckily, both survived. The pregnant lady, the baby, was fine. So they're both doing very well. But again, clear examples of deliberately shooting at these makeshift shelters where innocent, in these circumstances, two young women were living. So there's no way this can be explained by random collateral damage. It's deliberate targeting, as you describe.
And so people are clear about quadcopters. In terms of the operation of quadcopters, from your understanding, what is available, the visual information to the Israeli soldiers who are behind those quadcopters?
So the quadcopters are drones with 4 fixed rotors, so they can hover. They have cameras on them. They have guns associated on them as well, and they are driven. They're flown, remotely controlled by Israeli soldiers. I'm told some of it by artificial intelligence, but I can only speculate about that. But what is unequivocally true is that they are being controlled and going into hospitals, going into tents. I've seen them shooting people when I was at Deir al-Balah at Al-Aqsa Hospital last year, and they go into hospitals, they go into tents, and they shoot, and they're being controlled presumably by Israeli military. There was one theatre nurse called Hazem, who I know well. His sister is a theatre nurse. I've operated with her at European Gaza Hospital many times in recent years when I've been there doing cancer surgery. Her brother Hazem is a theatre nurse in Nasser Hospital, where I've just been. I worked with him on many days these last month. 9 months ago, he was working in the operating theatres at Nasser hospital, and a quadcopter remotely controlled by an Israeli military personnel went into the hospital, went into the theatre complex, which is on the 4th floor of the hospital, and shot Hazem in the chest. He survived, but they shot him in the chest whilst he was preparing the operating theatre for operations. He was then abducted by the Israeli military and taken off into an Israeli prison. Luckily only for 2 weeks. He was released after 2 weeks. Many others have been in prison for 6 months. So these quadcopters are used all over Gaza and are flown into hospitals to kill people.
I mean, you said there, and again, just unpacking this, it feels so gruesome and hideous, but about the shooting of babies in the head and the chest, and toddlers in the head and the chest. Just again, so we're clear about why that has to be intentional, is that because, for example, if you have what we describe as indiscriminate, reckless firing of bullets, which is a crime in of itself, but a different sort of crime, is the point you would then expect to receive patients where the bullets were kind of randomly around different parts of their body, whereas in these cases it was just the tendency was that and we're talking about, again, toddlers and babies here, that it was too specific to the head and the chest for that to be possible.
Those were the appearances, absolutely. It was the volume of cases we saw and what appeared to be the deliberate targeting. You know, we can only speculate about the intentions, but the appearances, and it's not just me, there are multiple doctors who have borne witness to this and seen so many of these injuries that the appearances are very, very suggestive of deliberate targeting.
This, as you say, this dystopian naming, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which replaced the effective UN system which Israel has waged war on, quite literally, having killed hundreds of aid workers, and even the Marine place in charge of the Gaza so-called Humanitarian Foundation resigned on the eve of its launch on the basis that it violated the basic principles of humanitarianism. It provides very, very little and often unusable aid because there isn't the cooking materials in order to food. But we've seen over 1,100 Palestinians killed. And, I mean, is that a lot of patients that you'll be receiving? It's people going, they don't have any food, they're desperately hungry, they go to these militarized aid points, and then they're just randomly shot at.
Yeah, I mean, there was one day when I did a video recording whilst I was in the emergency room, just voicing my thoughts as I witnessed this. There was a day when 30 dead bodies of young teenagers were brought in, had been shot. Another 50 had been shot and were alive. So 80 young boys all shot at this food distribution site. I've got appalling photos and memories of the families, the hysterical crying families carrying their dead sons out of the hospital for burial, and seeing dozens of them doing it at the same time. Just truly, truly awful. And this happened many, many days when I was out there, and as a recurring theme. So you're right. I mean, they had a good system. It was, as far as the system was in terms of distributing food, they had 400 food distribution points when UNRWA ran it. They were, of course, very restricted by the Israeli military, and that remains the case. But to replace that with 4 death traps is what people describe them as, 4 food distribution points, which are designed to create chaos. They're designed to create rioting, and they are death traps, allowing Israeli soldiers to shoot these kids. It's. I would not have believed it possible unless I was witnessing the results of those venues. The
UN-backed IPC concluded the worst-case scenario of famine is unfolding across the Gaza Strip. Can you just spell out what we're talking about in terms of the malnutrition that you were seeing? Like, where are people at in terms of people who are? You were talking about babies. Obviously, people, the more vulnerable will die first. That's obviously true. But What are you seeing? What are the actual the actual consequences? Where at what stage of malnutrition that you saw people?
Oh, severe. I mean, I called this out when I was there last summer. I called it out when I was there in December, January 23, 24. It is inestimably worse now. I mean, at every level. So colleagues of mine, friends of mine, surgeons I've worked with, I barely recognise some of them. Some of them had lost 30, 35 kilograms in weight. They're all absolutely exhausted. Patients, I operate predominantly on adults, but actually I operate on quite a few children on this occasion. In the adults, I saw people who had lost 30, 40 kilograms in weight, and they're not only profoundly malnourished when they come in, the effects of that malnutrition on their ability to heal from their devastating injuries, from the major surgery we carry out, their tissues don't heal. And of course we have no nutrition to give them when they're in hospital. So not only are they malnourished when they arrived, we have no nutritional support to give them. There is no food for these patients in the hospital. They are totally reliant upon their families bringing it in. So the mortality rate from these injuries, and I had many patients who died of their injuries, but they wouldn't have died had they not been malnourished. And that's just the adults. And the kids, I had patients on the paediatric intensive care unit, so I used to visit the paediatric unit every day. I saw newborn babies who die of malnutrition. There was a little girl called Zainab who was 8 months old. She looked a newborn. I've never seen any living being as thin as her, and she died a week ago. I saw many children. They have a malnutrition unit, a severe malnutrition unit. I used to go in there most days to talk to the families and see the kids, even though I wasn't directly responsible. And it was just so distressing seeing these poor little children being starved. They needed nutritional support. They needed formula feed, for example. They needed some of them intravenous feeding. There was no intravenous nutrition available. The formula feeds, I mentioned briefly earlier, the formula feeds were being confiscated, were being taken away by Israeli border guards. Doctors and nurses who were bringing formula feed in. They weren't just confiscating everything, they were taking away specifically the cartons of formula feed. I had a beautiful patient called Habiba, who was an 11-year-old girl who came in with a severe explosive injury from a bomb which had blown her up, and she had terrible damage to her esophagus in her chest. That's my main specialty that I operate on in England, and I spent all night operating on her, reconstructing her esophagus, knowing that she wouldn't be able to eat or drink for weeks on end, and she was therefore totally reliant upon nutritional support via a feeding tube I put in. But she was so malnourished she couldn't tolerate that. She developed something very severe called refeeding syndrome. So she needed intravenous feeding, and there was none to give her. And she was alive when I left, but I got a phone call end of last week to say she'd just died, which was deeply, deeply distressing. This poor 11-year-old girl, a preventable death. Major injuries, but a preventable death. And I could go on and on for hours talking about the malnutrition, how devastating it was. And this is a man-made forced starvation, deliberately so, by the Israeli government and military, which is preventing food getting in there, preventing nutritional supplements getting in there, deliberately and undoubtedly leading to deaths. It's obscene.
I mean, even if, and alas, this is not on the cards, even if all of a sudden now, by a miracle, Gaza was just mass flooded with food and other forms of aid, is it at the point where, medically speaking, lots of people have passed the point of no return, where they just wouldn't be able to? I mean, how many would that still be a situation of lots of people would still die as a consequence of being starved?
Absolutely. Even if they opened the borders and allowed unlimited trucks to come in, there are many patients who would still die, as you quite correctly said. Some of them are so profoundly malnourished that food would be dangerous for them. Food would not be that. They need acute medical care. Some of them need intravenous feeding. Some of them need. There's this condition called refeeding syndrome, which causes terrible imbalances in their blood and their electrolytes and the chemicals in the blood. It can cause fatal arrhythmias. So they need acute inpatient care to restore their nutrition. So some of them are far beyond the need simply for food now.
I've been seeing and hearing reports of nurses and doctors who you're referring to, you're shocked by how much weight they've lost, but they've been so starved that they're fainting whilst at work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a friend of mine, a surgeon out there, on several occasions almost passed out while he was operating and had to sit down, lie down, unscrub, because he was so hungry. Absolutely. And people fainting. I've seen nurses faint in theatres, and they come into work and we sometimes forget that they're living in a tent or a makeshift tent. Their families are starving. One anaesthetist I know used to go off in between operations to one of the food distribution sites in order to get food. He came back one day, and a colleague of mine was operating with him. He came back covered in cuts and bruises and grazes because he'd been fighting. Because in these food distribution points, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, they are designed to create. So again, I didn't see them, but I saw photographs. I had them described on so many occasions. There's a compound, a locked compound with food in there for about 300 people. They allow up to several thousand Gazans to accumulate, to gather outside the compound. There's one narrow gate, which they then open to let them in. And everyone knows there's a very, very limited amount of food. So that it is complete chaos. There's rioting, there's fighting. There are people trying to steal the food. It is complete chaos. And this anaesthetic colleague of mine, came in battered, bruised, grazed because they've been trying to get food for his starving family. So it's affecting the staff massively so.
I mean, I guess what you're seeing is a lot of these intersecting problems. People, they lack food, they lack fresh water, they lack shelter. Often suffering extreme heat at this time of year. They've been ground down by the trauma, indescribable trauma of what they've been subjected to. So I mean, it's just there's so many overlapping and illness, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're desperate, and the tension levels are very, very high. There's a lot of fighting between families, stealing food. It's very difficult to describe how tense everything was the whole time, and ending up being often very, very dangerous. There were multiple fights we saw, and this is just born out of desperation trying to get food.
I mean, with genocide, sorry, go on.
Literally starving to death, some of them. There are dozens of people who've died entirely and only of malnutrition. I didn't see them because I don't treat malnutrition by itself. I saw people dying of injuries and surgery with a background of severe malnutrition, and of course that was the major cause of their death. But there are people dying only of malnutrition, literally starving to death.
I mean, you're just talking about that kind of breakdown of society, basically. I mean, with genocide, we talk about of the people in whole or in part, and it's very clear and striking. If you starve an entire people, then just the very fabric of society just disintegrates.
Yeah, absolutely, and of course that's been in my view, what I've witnessed, the very, very clear, deliberate policy of the Israeli military to destroy the whole infrastructure of living in Gaza. We talked previously when you interviewed me about the deliberate destruction of hospitals, the complete disablement of hospitals, not just bombing hospitals, but dismantling all the apparatus in hospitals, dismantling the dialysis machines, the scanners, the laboratories, the targeting of healthcare workers, and killing of healthcare workers, the abduction and torturing of healthcare workers. the destruction of the agricultural system in Gaza, the destruction of the fishing system, the targeting of the desalination plants, everything, the education system, the university has all been destroyed. It's a very deliberate dismantling of the whole infrastructure of living in Gaza to make it uninhabitable and to make them to want to leave.
I mean,
there's all part of deliberate.
No, go on. It's all part of a deliberate strategy of genocide.
I think it's a very, very deliberate dismantling of the whole of Gaza to ethnically cleanse it as part of their genocide, to completely eradicate the population from Gaza.
I mean, just a couple of other things. There was journalists who took part in these flights, dropping a Gaza, which people should be clear is a pinprick of support, very inefficiently distributed because it's dropped in, it's not based on people's needs, often very dangerous areas, and has actually killed people by landing on their heads. But they were barred from filming what was below them. And if they did, they said then they would cancel those aid flights, the Israeli military. I mean, that itself just speaks to an attempt to just prevent people from seeing what they've done. I mean, is this just... Look, we see the pictures, we do see images of Gaza. It's beyond... there's only so much access from this distance. Like the amazing work of Palestinian journalists who've been slaughtered in the biggest slaughter of journalists in human history. I mean, is it just... We're talking apocalyptic ruin? Is that what we're talking here?
Absolutely, Owen. I mean, it is apocalyptic. The day we left Gaza last week, they'd massively increased the ground offensive in Deir al-Balah, you'll remember. We nearly didn't... We were told we weren't going to get out, actually. We just managed to get out. But we had to divert to avoid Deir al-Balah. We went quite far north, just to almost up to Gaza City. And then we went across to the border. And it was like a sort of dystopian... what are those, the Mad Max films, when you saw this just complete destruction of the land. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, there's mass destruction in the south, mass destruction, but this was on a different level. Every single building razed to the ground. A few people straggling around, walking around. It was the destruction is on a scale that's almost unimaginable. And then now, and Rafah's exactly the same. And they're doing it to Khan Yunis and the whole of the red zone now. So, and I think it's something like 86% or something of the whole of Gaza is now occupied by Israel under military control. Just, again, the so-called safe area, Al-Mawasi and Deir al-Balah, the two areas which they claim was safe. But of course they're being bombed. The tents are being bombed in Al-Mawasi every single day. Deir al-Balah is now being invaded and taken over. One of the scrub nurses I used to work with at Nasser Hospital 2 weeks ago took 2 days off and went back to his tent, and he said, I'm going to my tent in Al-Mawasi for a bit of chill time with my family, were his words, and he was killed the next morning with all his children by a bomb that bombed his tent in the so-called safe area. So nowhere is safe, and the destruction is unfathomable.
I mean, just finally, two Israeli human rights organisations, one of Bethlehem, they've just added to the chorus saying this is genocide. The consensus of genocide, and Holocaust scholars, including in Israel itself, say this is genocide, as everyone from Amnesty International as well to Médecins Sans Frontières. To those at this point, after 22 months, who say this isn't genocide, based on your experiences, what would you say to those people?
Well, I think they're either being profoundly disingenuous or deliberately lying. I mean, there can be no doubt there's a genocide. I think enough people have called it out. And I think our government needs to be honest and call this out and say what it is. They were more than happy to do so when they were describing what Putin was doing to the Ukraine. But the evidence I have seen with my own eyes and many, many others, it is indisputably a genocide. And people need to be honest and face up to that.
Nick, honestly, it was such a privilege speaking to you. Very, very difficult listening to that, but very, very necessary. This has been done in our name. We're still providing the crucial components to F-35 jets, which are slaughtering people in Gaza. And we're trading with Israel, £4 billion or so a year. We're not imposing sweeping sanctions against the Israeli state. I mean, it's this monstrous crime of the century, and you've borne witness to it. And I can't imagine what that must be like, but you speak so brilliantly and eloquently. It's so important to hear you. So for everyone listening, do share the video, press like, subscribe, leave your comments. Then more people will listen to Nick, which is what we want people to do, obviously. But Nick, honestly, it's such an honour to speak to you, and again, it's difficult for me to put into words what to even say to you, having endured some of the worst possible experiences that any human can possibly bear witness to. But history will remember what you and of course the Palestinian doctors and nurses and medical staff have done during this great crime. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Owen, for listening to me.
So they're shooting to control the population that's along the Marag corridor, and as they're doing that, they're shooting into this crowd, and Palestinians, civilians, human beings are dropping to the ground, getting shot, and Amir was one of them. Amir walked 12 kilometers to get food, got nothing but scraps, thanked us for it, and died.
The GHF, or what's called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, is being exposed big time, with more whistleblowers now coming out, especially after Anthony Aguilar, who's a retired lieutenant colonel, previous special forces in the United States Army, who served in Gaza, and came up with shocking statements blaming the United States of being an outright participant in the genocide inside of the Gaza Strip. This was an image circulating online of a child who Anthony helped in Gaza that was later killed by IDF terrorists. In this video, I'm going to give you all of the statements that are coming from Anthony in relation to the situation in Gaza and what this organization did. He had a couple of interviews that I wanted to share with you. This was one of them here on Democracy Now! Let's listen to what he had to say.
Anthony, thanks so much for joining us on Democracy Now! Can you start off by talking about your experience in Gaza and telling us exactly what you saw?
Thank you. It's an honor to be here and to share this story. I do not call this my story. I call this the story of the oppressed, the story of the Palestinians in Gaza who are dying at the hands of starvation and violence. What I witnessed in Gaza, I can only describe as a dystopian, post-apocalyptic wasteland. We, the United States, are complicit. We are involved, hand in hand, in the atrocities and the genocide that is currently undergoing in Gaza. For anyone who says that there is no starvation or mass hunger, or that not only are we at the precipice, but we have stepped over the line of wide-scale famine, to anyone who says that that's not happening, shame on you. Shame on you. It's inhumane. What I witnessed in Gaza at all 4 distribution sites. I didn't just go to one for a photo op. I didn't go to one to watch a distribution and then say, yes, this looks great. I spent days on end in Gaza at all 4 distribution sites, at Karim Shalom, where the aid is loaded for distribution, and at both operation centers that control the daily convoys, logistics, operations, and distribution for the 4 sites. What I saw on the sites, around the sites, to and from the sites, can be described as nothing but war crimes. Crimes against humanity. Violations of international law. This is not hyperbole. This is not platitudes or drama. This is the truth. I break that down by what I would describe as the sites themselves. I spoke to Senator Van Hollen last week, and we had a very frank discussion on the status of the sites and what's at these sites. The sites have not only become death traps, they were designed as death traps. All 4 distribution locations were intentionally, deliberately constructed, planned, and built in the middle of an active combat zone. Some may argue, well, all of Gaza is a war zone. That may be true, but there are parts of Gaza that are direct or that are determined to be active operational combat zones where Israeli Defense Forces are operating. Those sites were built in the middle of those areas, intentionally. It's not by accident. That in and of itself, to designate humanitarian distribution sites to service an unarmed, starving population, to build them deliberately in an active combat zone, is a violation of the Geneva Convention protocols. It's a violation of humanitarian law. And in my opinion, it's a violation of humanity in general. The sites, not only where they were built, all 4 sites around the perimeter and the roads leading in and out are barricaded by razor wire. Not barbed wire, not concertina wire that we use in warfare for obstacle obstruction or for paths. Razor wire. Geneva Conventions specifically prohibit the use of razor wire to restrict areas that civilians are servicing, hospitals, water points, food distribution points, and we're using it. Not only did the IDF provide it for us to use it on the sites, we, UG Solutions, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, asked for it specifically. Razor wire is designed to maim and kill, and we're using that to channelize and herd, if you will, thousands of unarmed, starving civilians. That's a war crime. The actions on the sites, escalation of force, no standard operating procedures to dictate that, no rules of engagement provided to the armed contractors on the ground. The indiscriminate use of force, lethal and non-lethal, against unarmed civilians. I want to make that clear. We aren't there on the distribution sites defending ourselves against Hamas. We are using indiscriminate force, targeting civilians, escalation of force that goes far beyond the measures of appropriate against an unarmed, starving population. The equipment that we were issued, fully automatic weapons, which in and of itself is not a violation of protocol. However, we were issued M855 green-tipped ammunition. That's important because green-tipped ammunition is a steel-jacketed copper round that's specifically designed to penetrate armor. It's designed to kill. It's designed to shoot through reinforced objects to kill someone on the other side of it. That's what all the UG Solutions contractors are equipped with right now in country. Everyone carries a standard basic load of 210 rounds of M855 armor-piercing military combat ammunition. Why would anyone need that? Even if to defend themselves, defend their lives against an unarmed population. It's inappropriate. That in and of itself, that action there is a war crime. I'd call the status of us being in the country. Every UG Solutions contract American, US citizens in Israel that are armed with fully automatic weapons in Gaza as we speak, today, right now, and have been since the 26th of May. We are in the country on a B2 entry visa as tourists. We're in the country as tourists. So if a family member wanted to go to Israel to visit Jerusalem, they would enter Israel on a tourist visa. That's the legal status that armed American citizens are in Gaza right now with the authority to use hostile force against an unarmed civilian on a tourist visa. That is a violation of humanitarian international law, period. The things that I just described are not just opinions, they're facts. The sites were designed to lure, bait, aid, and kill. The food that we distribute, nowhere near enough. To Mr. Johnny Moore, shame on you for celebrating 92 million meals delivered into Gaza. Shame on you. It's a very simple equation. 92 divided by 2.2 million people, divided by 3 million or 3 meals a day. That's what GHF proclaims. We've been distributing aid since the 26th of May. 26 May down to the 29th of June, 64 days of continuous distribution. And we've only managed to distribute 92 million meals. When you break that down, again, it's a simple equation. That's 14 days of meals. So out of 64 days, we provided 14 days of meals to the entire population in the enclave of Gaza. That's inhumane. That would be like saying that you only eat every fourth day. You only eat on Thursday and you only eat on Monday. And to say that that's humanitarian? So to anyone that says that that's enough or not even close to enough, the narrative of GHF needs help to do the rest, you don't need help because you're not anywhere close to where we need to be. The fact is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is not trained, equipped, manned, or staffed to run humanitarian aid and humanitarian assistance of this magnitude. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation needs to be defunded, shut down, and the United Nations needs to be allowed back in full scale, supported by the United States, resourced, helped. Instead of giving the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation $60 million, use that $60 million to support the United Nations mechanism to get 400 sites back to operating, to feed 2.1 million people every day. That was the capacity of the United Nations. So what I saw in Gaza, to me, concerns me as an American. What we are doing in Gaza, in being complicit with what the Israeli Defense Forces are doing, is un-American. I didn't come forward to talk because I want to disregard the struggle and the fight. I stand with Israel against Hamas in their atrocities. The world stands with Israel against Hamas in their atrocities. No one would argue that October 7th wasn't atrocious. But if we as a nation, the United States, and Israel, one of our closest allies, if we go down the road of saying we're doing what Hamas did and saying that that's okay, we are losing our humanity. And we cannot go down that road. It's un-American. It's not in line with our values.
So that was the first statement coming from him. Clearly a man on Israel's side. He's criticizing Hamas. He says that he is with Israel. And despite that, despite the fact that he is pro-Israel blatantly, he is heavily criticizing what's happening in relation to the GHF. And that wasn't the only statement that he had. He had several other statements where he described the circumstances and exactly what he was ordered to do and who he was working for. For example, this interview that he had
I was
here.
told very explicitly, directly to my face, that our client is the IDF.
Your client is the IDF.
Our client is the IDF. And this came out in a discussion once where I was in the control room. I was on I was on control room duty that day. We had shifted responsibilities on a rotational base. So I was in there that day with the radio observing site number 2 distribution. A Palestinian man had picked up some children to let them step on his shoulders to get onto a berm because they were being crushed in the crowd. Site 2 is very small, smallest of all 4 sites. And these children are being crushed, and you pick them up there and put them up on the berm. And the Israeli Defense Forces liaison officer in the main control center with us comes up to the screen that I'm watching and he says, "Tell your men to get them down." I was like, "We got this under control." I was like, "I know they know what they're doing. No, they're children. Let's calm down. Get them down now, or I will." Well, there's no IDF on the site, so I didn't take it as much more than just being, bombastic and okay, hey, we got this. He leaves and goes to his desk in the operations center, and he gets on the radio and he speaks something on the radio. It was in Hebrew. I don't speak Hebrew. One of the contractors that was there was American that did speak Hebrew, and he notifies me. He said, "Hey, he just told the snipers at the IDF position, because the site number 2 is co-located with an Israeli base. Said he just told the snipers to take these kids out." I was like, "On the radio?" He's like, "Yeah." This lieutenant colonel then comes back up and he says, "Get them down." And I look at him and I say, "Did you just call on the radio and tell your men to shoot them?" And he said, "I'm going to take care of this if you don't." I said, "You are not going to shoot. You are not going to shoot children. You're also not going to shoot because if your men miss, you're going to hit others. You're not going to shoot." Thank God we didn't come to the conclusion of figuring out whether he would or not, because the children jumped down and ran off of the site. They didn't want to be there. They were unarmed. They didn't have shoes. One wasn't even wearing a shirt. They were starving. The chief operations officer for Safe Reach Solutions, our higher headquarters, so to speak, in the contract, beckoned me outside with him, and he looked at me in the face and he said, "Never say no to the client." And I asked him, I was like, "I didn't know the client was in there. Who's here? Did Johnny Moore come to visit?" And he said, "No, the IDF." I was like, "The IDF are our client?" He said, "Yes, we work for them." A light bulb went off in my head.
That was the second one. And the final one is the example of what he has done with one of the children who he was helping inside of the Gaza Strip, and what exactly happened to him. Listen to this video over here.
We treat the civilians in Gaza worse than we treated ISIS, if that's any indication to you know the level of inhumanity. This young boy, this is on May 28th on secure distribution site number 2. The aid had been distributed. A lot of people had left. You see behind, there's a crowd of people still with their boxes, kind of getting ready to leave. And this little boy, his name is Amir, and he was standing, you know, he was with the crowd, but he walks over, and you see that first picture on the top right. He kind of walks over to me, and he puts out his hand. And at first I thought like that he wanted more food or something, and I felt bad because I didn't have anything. But I was like, "Oh, I have nothing." And he puts out his hand, and so I beckoned him to come to me. I said, "You know, come here." And he reaches out and he holds my hand, and he kisses my hand. He kisses my hand, and he says, "Shukran." You can see in this picture that this little boy is not wearing shoes. His clothes are falling off of him because he's so skinny. I put my hand on his left shoulder, and I looked at him, and he's looking at me. We're looking at each other in the eyes, and I say to him, "People care. You're a human being, and people care about you. The world cares. That's not Hamas. That's not a Hamas fighter." And I looked at him and I said, "The world cares." And he put down the little food he has. You notice he doesn't have a box. He doesn't have a box of food. He has half of a bag of rice that he found on the ground, a broken bag, half a bag of lentils that he found on the ground, and he was thanking us. Thank you. This little boy, from where he came from, walked 12 kilometers to get there, just to get there. 12 kilometers. Look at this boy. And when he got there, he thanked us for the remnants and the small crumbs that he got. And he sets them down on the ground, because I was kneeling at this point, and he sets his food down, and he places his hands on my face, on the side of my face, on my cheeks, these frail, skeleton, emaciated hands, dirty. And he puts them on my face, and he kissed me. He kissed me, and he said, "Thank you," in English. "Thank you." And he collected his items, and he walked back to the group. And then he was shot at with pepper spray and tear gas and stun grenades and bullets shot at his feet and in the air. And he runs away scared. I was on the inside of the site, so there's berms that surround the site, so I couldn't see outside of the site. So the last group of people, women and children and small children and kids and children and babies, are leaving the site. And as they're leaving the site and they get to the next intersection, I hear machine gun fire. It startled me because I didn't know what was going on. So I ran up to the berm. You see the berm behind him there. I ran up to the berm so I could look. And I run up to the berm and I get down and I'm kind of like in a covered position, and I'm looking like, oh, what's going on? I thought we were being attacked. And the IDF were shooting at the crowd. And I want to point this out. When they left the site, the road to leave the site is covered on both sides by a berm. The IDF can't see that. All the IDF get to see from where their position is that as these civilians come out and they hit that main corridor, they don't, if they're shooting warning shots to control the population from going east, they can't see on the other side of that berm. And they don't even know that. They don't know that they can't see that because they didn't, you know, they don't have control of the sites. They have to stay away from the sites. So they're shooting to control the population that's along the Marag corridor. And as they're doing that, they're shooting into this crowd. And Palestinians, civilians, human beings are dropping to the ground, getting shot. And Amir was one of them. Amir walked 12 kilometers to get food, got nothing but scraps, thanked us for it, and died.
So that was the evidence that's coming straight up from a person who participated in the GHF. I'm not sure how accurate his statement is about the IDF not seeing. That's something I'm not entirely sure of. And at the end of the day, the man said that he is supporting Israel, you know. But regardless of that, all of the statements are directly proving how complicit the United States is. And this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or the Genocide Humanitarian Foundation, nothing but an experiment against the population that is intended there to keep the population starving. They're hardly giving them anything. Their client is clearly the IDF, so they're not there to provide this humanitarian mission. And it's not providing an answer to the crisis inside of the Gaza Strip. More and more people from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation are coming out now. It's proving that this organization was intended to serve Israel rather than serve anything else. And not everyone is like this man. So imagine about the other cases that some of these people did not speak about. Well, we heard about them. We heard about them from the Palestinian side. Red light, yellow light, green light, like the Gaza Squid Game, times 1 million in its barbarity, killing people left, right, and center, shooting at crowds indiscriminately, killing all of them. Every day, dozens of people get killed just to go to seek aid after walking for kilometers. Some of them die on the way, some of them die on the way back because they're already thirsty, they're hungry, they're not facing anything. That is the reality. The United States is directly participating, and that has to change. This barbarism needs to stop. And all of the recent moves with the airdropped aid and a couple of trucks going in from Egypt towards Karm Abu Salam, that's nothing. These are just ways for the governments to cover up the crimes of Israel and to lower the pressure that's coming from the population. The governments are hiding the reality from us and are trying to put makeup on the starvation campaign, the forced starvation campaign against the civilian population of Gaza.